I never thought a 100-year-old wooden bridge on my private property would become the center of a legal nightmare that would cost an HOA president her freedom and nearly bankrupt an entire community. My name is Zachary Voss, and I own 43 acres of prime lakefront property in northern Minnesota, just outside the town of Brainerd. The land had been in my family since 1921, passed down from my great-grandfather who worked the lumber mills. Most of the property is dense forest with a natural spring-fed lake right in the middle. The only way to access the far side of the lake, where my cabin sits, is via an old wooden bridge my great-grandfather built by hand. It's sturdy enough, though it shows its age. I've maintained it over the years, replacing boards when needed, reinforcing the supports. It handles my truck just fine, and that's all I've ever needed. The trouble started about 6 months ago when a development company bought the land adjacent to mine. They cleared 20 acres and built what they called a luxury lakeside resort community. 30 McMansions, each worth over $1 million, all managed by the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. The HOA was run by a woman named Patricia Greenfield, a 52-year-old former real estate agent who treated her position like she was governing a small nation. I first met Patricia on a Tuesday morning in late September. I was on my front porch, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise over the lake, when a white Mercedes SUV came barreling down my driveway. The woman who emerged wore expensive activewear and oversized sunglasses despite the early hour. "Are you Zachary Voss?" she called out, not bothering with pleasantries. "That's me," I said, setting down my mug. "I'm Patricia Greenfield, president of the Pine Ridge HOA. We need to discuss your bridge." I frowned. "What about it?" She pulled out her phone and showed me what looked like architectural plans. "Our community has been reviewing access points to the lake, and we've determined that your bridge would serve as an excellent amenity for our residents. However, it needs significant upgrades to meet our standards and safety codes." I nearly laughed. "Lady, that bridge is on my property. It's been there for over a century, and it's none of your business." Her jaw tightened. "Actually, Mr. Voss, it is our business. Several of our residents have expressed interest in accessing the eastern shore of the lake for recreational purposes. Your bridge is the only viable crossing point." "Then they can walk around," I said flatly. "It's my land and my bridge." Patricia's smile was glacial. "We're prepared to offer you compensation for upgrading the structure, $20,000 for materials and labor. You'll hire contractors from our approved list, of course." "I'm not upgrading anything. The bridge is fine as it is, and even if it weren't, your residents have no right to use it." She removed her sunglasses, her eyes cold. "Mr. Voss, I don't think you understand the situation. The Pine Ridge HOA has considerable resources and legal expertise. We've already consulted with our attorneys, and there are several ordinances that could apply here. Public access easements, safety violations, environmental concerns. We're trying to be neighborly and offer you a fair deal." "Here's my deal," I said, standing up. "You and your HOA stay off my property and we won't have any problems. The bridge is private. End of discussion." Patricia's face flushed red. "You're making a serious mistake. We have rights as property owners too, and we will exercise them. You'll be hearing from our legal team." She stormed back to her Mercedes and peeled out, spraying gravel everywhere. I watched her go, feeling uneasy. I'd dealt with difficult neighbors before, but something about Patricia's tone made me think this wasn't over. I was right. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the Pine Ridge HOA's law firm, Henderson and Associates, out of Minneapolis. The letter claimed that my bridge constituted a safety hazard because it was visible from several HOA properties, and therefore fell under their jurisdiction. They cited some obscure county ordinance about shared recreational infrastructure and demanded I either upgrade the bridge to their specifications or face legal action. I took the letter to my own attorney, a guy named Mike Rodriguez who'd handled my parents' estate and knew property law inside out. He read it twice, then shook his head. "This is garbage," Mike said. "Complete overreach. Your bridge is entirely on your property. You maintain it privately, and there's no legal basis for them to demand anything. This shared recreational infrastructure ordinance, their citing applies to things like boat launches and public beaches, not private bridges on private land." "So what do I do?" I asked. "Ignore it, or better yet, let me send them a response making it clear they have no standing. If they want to push this, we'll bury them in court." Mike drafted a polite but firm letter explaining exactly why the HOA had no authority over my bridge. I thought that would be the end of it. Again, I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I came home from a supply run in town to find survey stakes planted all along the edge of my property line nearest the HOA development. There were orange flags every 10 feet, and several men in hard hats were taking measurements near my bridge. I pulled my truck up fast and got out. "What the hell are you doing?" One of the men, a stocky guy with a clipboard, looked up. "Survey work. We're contracted by Pine Ridge HOA." "That's my land you're on." He consulted his clipboard. "Our paperwork says we have permission to survey up to the bridge structure for a planned easement. You have no such permission. Get off my property now, or I'm calling the sheriff." The man held up his hands. "Hey, we're just doing our job. We were told the property owner was cooperative." "Well, you were lied to. Pack up and leave." They did, though not before taking a few more photos. I immediately called Mike, who was furious when I explained what happened. "They're trying to establish some kind of claim," he said. "Document everything. Take photos, keep records of every interaction. I'll file a cease and desist order first thing Monday morning." That weekend, Patricia showed up again, this time with 2 other women I assumed were HOA board members. One was a tall brunette in yoga pants named Margaret something, and the other was a blonde with too much Botox who introduced herself as Susan Hendricks, the HOA treasurer. "Mr. Voss, we seem to have gotten off on the wrong foot," Patricia began, her tone suggesting she was doing me a favor by being there. "We're here to make you a better offer, $50,000, and we'll handle all the upgrade costs ourselves. You won't have to do anything except grant us an easement for our residents to use the bridge." "No," I said simply. Susan spoke up, her voice grating. "That's an extremely generous offer. Do you have any idea what $50,000 could do for this property? You could finally fix up that old cabin, get a new roof. My cabin is fine. My roof is fine. And my bridge is staying exactly as it is for my use only." Margaret crossed her arms. "You're being unreasonable. We're offering you money for something you already have. This would benefit everyone." "Everyone except me," I countered. "I don't want strangers traipsing across my property. I don't want the liability of having your residents use my bridge. I don't want the noise and the traffic and the garbage. I want to be left alone on my own land." Patricia's pleasant facade cracked. "You're a selfish man, Mr. Voss. This community represents progress and prosperity for this area. Your stubborn refusal to cooperate is going to cost you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. We will exercise every legal option available to us. Your bridge is a danger to the community, and we will see it brought up to code or removed entirely." After they left, I sat on my porch for a long time thinking. The bridge was important to me. It wasn't just functional. It was a piece of family history. My great-grandfather had built it with his own hands, using timber from the property. My grandfather had reinforced it in the 50s. My father had taught me to fish from its railings. The idea of tearing it down or letting some HOA dictate how it should look made my blood boil. But I also knew Patricia wasn't bluffing. She had money and lawyers and the kind of entitled determination that came from never being told no. Over the next month, the harassment escalated. I started getting citations from the county building inspector, claiming I needed permits for the bridge despite it being grandfathered in. Each citation was clearly prompted by complaints from the HOA. Mike got them dismissed, but it was time-consuming and stressful. Then the HOA filed a lawsuit. They claimed the bridge was a public nuisance and an attractive nuisance that posed a danger to their residents, particularly children who might wander onto my property. They wanted a court order forcing me to either upgrade it to meet commercial building standards or demolish it entirely. Mike was confident we'd win, but the legal process was draining. Depositions, document requests, court appearances. The HOA had deep pockets and seemed determined to bury me in paperwork. During a particularly contentious deposition at their lawyer's office in Minneapolis, Patricia sat across from me with a satisfied expression. "Why don't you just sell us an easement?" their attorney asked. "My clients have increased their offer to $75,000. That's more than fair for a simple right-of-way." "Because it's not about the money," I said, probably for the 10th time. "It's about my privacy and my property rights. Your stubbornness is going to cost you far more than $75,000 in legal fees," the attorney said. "Then I guess we'll see how it plays out in court." But something else was bothering me. During a break, I overheard Patricia talking to Susan in the hallway. "Once we get the easement, we can start the next phase," Patricia was saying. "The private beach club on his eastern shore will be the crown jewel of Pine Ridge. Property values will double." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about the bridge. They wanted access across my land so they could eventually claim more of it. The bridge was just the first step in a larger plan. I told Mike what I'd overheard, and he immediately requested discovery documents about Pine Ridge's long-term development plans. What we found was shocking. The HOA had preliminary drawings for a private resort beach on the far side of the lake, complete with cabanas, a snack bar, and boat docks. All of it on land they didn't own. My land. Their strategy was becoming clear. Get the easement for the bridge, establish a pattern of their residents using my property, then claim some kind of prescriptive easement or adverse possession for the beach area. It was a long game, but with enough time and legal pressure, they might actually pull it off. "We need to go on offense," Mike said. "This is harassment and we can prove it. We file a countersuit for the legal costs and emotional distress and we make it hurt." We did exactly that. Mike filed a comprehensive countersuit alleging harassment, abuse of process, and conspiracy to deprive me of my property rights. We attached all the documentation: the survey trespass, the frivolous building citations, Patricia's threats, and the secret resort plans. The local newspaper got wind of the story, and suddenly I was getting calls from reporters. "Local landowner fights HOA's resort plans," ran in the Brainerd Dispatch. The article painted Patricia and the HOA as bullies trying to steal private land, and public opinion in town swung heavily in my favor. That's when things got nasty. Someone cut down 4 mature oak trees on my property line, trees that had partially blocked the view from HOA properties to my bridge. The county sheriff, a no-nonsense guy named Tom Haverson, came out to investigate, but there was no evidence pointing to anyone specific. "Off the record," Sheriff Haverson told me, "I'd bet my badge it was someone from that HOA. We've had complaints about them before. power-hungry busybodies with too much time and money, but without proof, there's not much I can do. A week later, I discovered someone had poured concrete mix into the lock on my front gate. Then my mailbox was knocked over. Small acts of vandalism, but the message was clear: comply or suffer. I installed security cameras around my property, focusing especially on the bridge and the approaches to my cabin. If they were going to keep harassing me, I was going to document every second of it. The lawsuit dragged into winter. Minnesota winters are brutal, and the legal battle felt just as cold. During a pre-trial hearing in January, the judge seemed skeptical of the HOA's claims. "Let me get this straight," Judge Andrea Morrison said, peering over her reading glasses. "You're suing Mr. Voss because you want your residents to use his private bridge, which is entirely on his property, and he's refused." The HOA's attorney, a slick guy named Richard Henderson, tried to spin it. "Your Honor, this is about community safety and proper infrastructure maintenance. The bridge is a hazard. Has anyone been injured on this bridge?" the judge asked. "Well, no, but has Mr. Voss ever invited any Pine Ridge residents to use the bridge?" "No, Your Honor, but the bridge is visible from several HOA properties, and our residents have expressed concern about its condition." Judge Morrison looked unimpressed. "So you want to force Mr. Voss to upgrade a bridge on his own property that he maintains for his own use, that none of your residents have any legal right to access, because they can see it and don't like how it looks?" "It's more complex than that, Your Honor. The resort amenities that could be developed on Mr. Voss's land," the judge interjected. "Land he owns and that you have no claim to. We believe there are grounds for a public access easement based on historical use patterns." I nearly laughed out loud. Historical use patterns. My family had owned this land for over a century, and the HOA had existed for less than a year. Judge Morrison scheduled a full trial for March, but her tone suggested she thought the HOA's case was weak at best. I left the courthouse feeling cautiously optimistic, but Patricia wasn't done. In February, I received another letter from the HOA, this time claiming they'd filed a complaint with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources about environmental damage caused by my bridge. They alleged that the structure was disrupting natural water flow and harming fish habitats. It was complete nonsense. My bridge had stood for 100 years without causing any environmental problems, but it triggered another investigation, another series of inspections, more wasted time and energy. The DNR inspector who came out was actually sympathetic. "Mr. Voss, I'll be honest with you. This complaint is bogus. Your bridge has zero environmental impact. It's clearly a harassment tactic." "Can you put that in writing?" I asked. "Absolutely. I'll submit my report next week. You've got nothing to worry about from the DNR." The inspector's report cleared me completely, but it was the last straw. I was exhausted from months of fighting, from constant legal bills, from the stress of wondering what Patricia and her HOA would try next. I'd spent over $30,000 on attorney fees, and we hadn't even gone to trial yet. That night, I sat on my bridge with a bottle of beer, watching the moon reflect off the frozen lake. The bridge creaked gently beneath me, the old wood solid and familiar. I thought about my great-grandfather hand cutting every beam, my grandfather's repairs, my father's memories. And then I thought about Patricia's entitled face, her threats, her schemes to steal my land. I thought about the HOA's resort plans and their determination to turn my private property into their playground. An idea began forming. A radical idea, but one that would solve everything. I called Mike the next morning. What would happen if I just removed the bridge? There was a long pause. You mean tear it down completely? Take it out, haul away every piece of wood. If there's no bridge, there's nothing for them to fight about. Mike was quiet, thinking. Legally, you'd be within your rights. It's your property, your structure. The HOA's lawsuit would become moot since they're specifically fighting over the bridge. But Zach, that's your family's bridge. Are you sure? I'm not sure about anything anymore, I admitted. But I know I'm sick of this fight. If removing the bridge ends this nightmare, it might be worth it. Let me think about the strategic implications, Mike said. Give me a day. Mike called back the next afternoon, and I could hear the smile in his voice. This is brilliant. If you remove the bridge, their entire lawsuit collapses. They're specifically demanding you upgrade or maintain the bridge. If there's no bridge, there's nothing to litigate. Plus, it would expose their real intentions. They don't actually care about safety or maintenance. They want access to your land. Without the bridge, they can't get to the eastern shore, and their resort plans are dead. So you think I should do it? I think it's a bold move that would end this mess immediately. But Zach, make sure you're ready for the fallout. Patricia is going to lose her mind. I spent the next week carefully dismantling the bridge. I took my time, removing each board and beam with care. Some of the original timbers from 1921 were still solid, and I stored them in my barn. It felt like saying goodbye to a piece of family history, but there was also something satisfying about it. Patricia wanted to control my bridge, wanted to tell me how to maintain it, wanted to use it for her profit. Well, she couldn't control what didn't exist. I hired a local contractor to help with the heavy structural elements, and by mid-February, the bridge was completely gone. In its place, the narrow creek that fed the lake flowed free, about 12 feet wide and 3 feet deep at its deepest point. Crossable on foot during summer, but impassable with any vehicle. The eastern shore of my property, where my cabin sat, was now only accessible by boat or a 2-mile hike around the lake through rough terrain. I took dozens of photos of the completed removal and sent them to Mike with a simple message. Mission accomplished. Mike filed an immediate motion to dismiss the HOA's lawsuit as moot, attaching the photos. The structure that forms the basis of plaintiff's complaint no longer exists. Mr. Voss has removed the bridge entirely, thereby eliminating any alleged safety concerns or maintenance issues. The lawsuit no longer has any viable subject matter. I wish I could have seen Patricia's face when she got that filing. She showed up at my property the next day, absolutely apoplectic with rage. I was working in my barn when I heard her screaming from the property line. "What have you done? What have you done, you insane man?" I walked out to meet her. She was standing where the bridge used to be, staring at the empty space like she couldn't comprehend it. "I removed my bridge from my property," I said calmly. "Problem solved. You destroyed a historic structure." "You've eliminated the only access point to my land," I pointed out, "which you have no right to access anyway." Patricia's face was purple with fury. "This is destruction of property, vandalism. I'll have you arrested for demolishing my own bridge on my own land. Good luck with that. You did this to sabotage our community, our property values." "I did this because I'm tired of being harassed. You wanted me to do something about the bridge, so I did. I removed it completely. Now you can't sue me over it, and your residents have no reason to trespass on my land." Susan had arrived too, and she looked like she might cry. "But our resort plans, the beach club, how will we access the eastern shore?" "You won't," I said flatly. "That's the point. That shore is part of my private property, and you were never going to get access to it anyway." Patricia stepped closer, her voice low and threatening. "You're going to rebuild that bridge. We'll get a court order forcing you to rebuild it." "On what grounds? You can't force me to build a bridge on my own property. That's not how property rights work." "We'll see about that." but I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew I was right. Without the bridge, her entire legal strategy had collapsed. More importantly, without access across my property, the eastern shore of the lake was essentially unreachable, and all those expensive resort plans were worthless. True to Mike's prediction, the HOA's attorney filed an emergency motion demanding I rebuild the bridge. Judge Morrison held a hearing 2 days later, and it was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. "Let me make sure I understand the plaintiff's position," Judge Morrison said, her tone dripping with skepticism. "You're now asking this court to order Mr. Voss to construct a bridge on his private property." Richard Henderson tried to sound confident. "Your Honor, Mr. Voss's destruction of the bridge was a calculated act designed to interfere with legitimate community interests. The bridge was a historic structure and a vital access point. A vital access point to Mr. Voss's private land, which your clients have no legal right to access. We believe the deliberate removal of the bridge constitutes bad faith negotiation and possibly criminal destruction of property." Judge Morrison actually laughed. "Mr. Henderson, are you seriously arguing that a property owner cannot remove a structure from his own property? A structure that was not landmark designated, not subject to any historic preservation orders, and entirely within his rights to maintain or remove as he saw fit. The timing is suspicious, Your Honor. This was clearly done to undermine our lawsuit. Your lawsuit demanded that Mr. Voss either upgrade or maintain the bridge. He solved that problem by removing it. The lawsuit is moot. As for ordering him to rebuild it, I have no legal authority to force a property owner to construct a structure on his own land. That's an absurd request." "But the HOA residents' property values are affected by what? By the fact that they can't access property they don't own. That's not a legal injury, Mr. Henderson. Your client's property values are not Mr. Voss's responsibility." The judge dismissed the HOA's motion and their entire lawsuit with prejudice, meaning they couldn't refile. She also ordered the HOA to pay my legal fees, which totaled over $35,000 by that point. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Patricia confronted me one last time. "You haven't won anything," she hissed. "You've just made yourself an enemy." "I never wanted an enemy," I said. "I wanted to be left alone. You made this fight, not me." "We'll find another way to develop that shore. You can't stop progress. That shore is on my property. Any development would require my permission, which you'll never get. You lost. Accept it and move on." But Patricia didn't move on. Over the next few weeks, I noticed increased activity near my property line. Survey crews, contractors, engineers. They were planning something, but I couldn't figure out what. Then, in early March, I discovered what they'd been up to. The HOA had begun construction on a boat dock and launch area on their side of the lake. At first, I didn't care. It was their property and a boat dock didn't affect me. But then I noticed the dock extended much further than necessary. It stretched nearly 40 feet into the lake, and the end was directly across from my eastern shore, less than 100 feet away. They were building a water route to my land. I called Mike immediately. "They're trying an end run. If they can boat across to my shore, they don't need the bridge." "That's still trespassing," Mike said. "Your property extends to the water line." "But how do I stop them from pulling up boats? I can't be there 24/7. "We can get an injunction prohibiting their residents from accessing your shore. I'll file it today." Mike did file for the injunction, but before the court could hear it, something happened that changed everything. In mid-March, I was checking my security cameras and noticed something odd. Late one night, a figure had approached my property from the HOA side, carrying what looked like surveying equipment. The person had planted markers along my eastern shore, right where the HOA's resort plans showed the proposed beach club. I downloaded the footage and sent it to Mike. "Is this what I think it is?" Mike enhanced the video and we could clearly see the person's face in the moonlight. It was Patricia Greenfield, personally planting survey stakes on my property in the middle of the night. "This is trespassing," Mike said, "and possibly something more. She's marking your property as if it belongs to the HOA. Combined with their lawsuit and harassment campaign, this could constitute criminal conspiracy to defraud you of your land." We turned the evidence over to Sheriff Haverson, who was extremely interested. "I've been waiting for something concrete on that woman. Let me dig into this." What Sheriff Haverson uncovered was bigger than any of us expected. He obtained a warrant for the HOA's financial records and discovered that Patricia had been embezzling HOA funds for over a year. More than $200,000 had been siphoned into her personal accounts. She'd used some of it to fund the lawsuit against me, paying the legal fees from HOA funds without proper authorization from the board. But that wasn't all. Patricia had also been accepting kickbacks from the development company that wanted to build the resort on my land. The plan was for her to secure access to my eastern shore through legal means or otherwise, then sell that access to the developer for a substantial personal profit. The HOA residents would get their beach club, the developer would get exclusive resort rights, and Patricia would pocket $500,000 under the table. It was fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, all wrapped up in one tidy package. Sheriff Haverson arrested Patricia at an HOA board meeting in late March. I heard from multiple sources that she'd been mid-sentence, talking about dealing with the Voss problem, when two deputies walked in and placed her in handcuffs. The charges were extensive: embezzlement, fraud, trespassing, criminal conspiracy, and abuse of process. The county prosecutor was particularly interested in the conspiracy angle, since Patricia had deliberately misused HOA funds to pursue a frivolous lawsuit designed to defraud me of my property. The HOA fell into chaos. Susan Hendricks took over as interim president and immediately tried to distance the organization from Patricia's actions. She sent me a formal letter apologizing for the harassment and acknowledging that the HOA had no claim to my property or the bridge. "The Pine Ridge HOA deeply regrets the actions taken by our former president," Susan's letter read. "We recognize that Mr. Voss has been subjected to unfair harassment and legal pressure, and we wish to assure him that we have no designs on his property and will respect his privacy going forward." Too little, too late, but at least the fighting was over. Patricia's trial was scheduled for June, but she ended up pleading guilty to multiple felonies in exchange for a reduced sentence. She received 4 years in prison and was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA and to me for legal damages. The local media covered the story extensively. HOA president sentenced in embezzlement and fraud scheme ran in newspapers across Minnesota. The story became a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and the dangers of giving too much power to neighborhood busybodies. The Pine Ridge HOA ultimately had to levy a special assessment on all residents to cover the money Patricia had stolen and the legal fees from the failed lawsuit. Property values in the development dropped significantly once the scandal became public. Several residents sued the remaining board members for negligence in not catching Patricia's fraud sooner. The developer who'd been planning the resort pulled out entirely, citing reputational concerns. The elaborate dock the HOA had built sat empty, since without access to my eastern shore, it served no purpose except for residents putting in kayaks. As for me, I rebuilt my bridge. Not the same way it had been, but a new version. I used the original timbers from 1921 that I'd saved, incorporating them into a stronger, more modern structure. It was like honoring my great-grandfather's work while making something my own. This time, though, I added a gate. A locked gate at the western end, with a very clear private property no trespassing sign. I also installed cameras monitoring the bridge from multiple angles, feeding directly to cloud storage. If anyone from the HOA ever set foot on my bridge again, I'd have ironclad evidence. Mike helped me file all the necessary paperwork to have the bridge formally recognized as a historic family structure, which gave it certain legal protections. We also recorded easement disclaimers with the county, making it crystal clear that no public right-of-way existed across my property. The legal battle cost me time, money, and stress, but in the end I won. More importantly, I'd made my point. Patricia had tried to bully me into giving up my rights, into letting her HOA take control of my family's land. Instead, her greed and arrogance had landed her in prison and destroyed her reputation. I spent that summer on my porch, fishing from my new bridge, enjoying the peace and quiet I'd fought so hard to preserve. Occasionally, I'd see HOA residents walking their dogs or jogging past my property line, but they always stayed on their side. Word had gotten around about what happened to Patricia, and nobody wanted to repeat her mistakes. One afternoon in August, Susan Hendricks came to my gate. She didn't come onto my property, just called out from the road. "Mr. Voss, do you have a minute?" I walked down to meet her, keeping the gate between us. "What can I do for you?" She looked embarrassed. I wanted to apologize personally. I was part of Patricia's board, and I should have seen what she was doing. Should have stopped it before it got so out of hand. "You're not responsible for her crimes," I said. I voted for the lawsuit. I supported the idea of accessing your property for the beach club. "I thought you were just being difficult." She shook her head. "I didn't understand what you were protecting. Family history, privacy, the right to be left alone on your own land. Patricia kept telling us it was about community improvement and property values, and I believed her. A lot of people believed her. Anyway, I wanted you to know that the new HOA board has formally voted to acknowledge your property rights and to ensure no future claims or actions are taken regarding your land. It's in the official minutes and our bylaws now. Pine Ridge residents have no access to your property or the Eastern Shore, period. I appreciate that, I said, meaning it. We also voted to pay the court-ordered restitution immediately, rather than waiting for Patricia's payments. You should receive a check for your legal fees within the week. True to her word, a check arrived 5 days later. $38,467, covering every penny I'd spent fighting their lawsuit. The case made enough noise that I got calls from newspapers, and even a couple of podcasts wanting to interview me about the experience. I did a few, figuring it might help other property owners dealing with aggressive HOAs. The message was always the same. Know your rights, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight back when someone tries to take what's yours. HOAs can be useful for maintaining community standards, but when they're run by people like Patricia who see themselves as petty tyrants, they become dangerous. I also started hearing from other landowners dealing with similar situations. A guy in Wisconsin whose HOA wanted to force him to remove a historic barn. A woman in Montana fighting to keep horses on her property despite new HOA restrictions. I shared Mike's contact information and offered whatever advice I could. The most satisfying moment came in October, when the Pine Ridge development held its annual meeting to elect new board members. Susan told me later that membership participation was at an all-time high, with residents determined not to let another Patricia take control. They elected a board of 5 reasonable people who ran on a platform of respecting property rights and focusing on actual community needs. No more grand schemes, no more harassment of neighbors, no more secret development deals. The new board even reached out to other property owners in the area, including me, to establish good neighbor relations. They invited me to a community barbecue, which I politely declined, but I appreciated the gesture. One evening in late November, I was sitting on my bridge watching the first snow of the season when my phone rang. It was Mike. I thought you'd want to know. Patricia filed an appeal of her sentence and it was denied. She starts her 4-year prison term next week. Good, I said simply. The prosecutor also told me something interesting. Apparently, Patricia tried to blame you in her pre-sentencing statement, said you were an obstruction to community progress and that she'd only done what was necessary to serve her residents. I laughed bitterly. Even after everything, she still doesn't get it. Narcissists never do. But the judge shut her down hard, told her she had no right to anyone else's property regardless of her plans, and that her sense of entitlement had led her to commit serious crimes. I guess Patricia actually cried. After we hung up, I sat for a while longer, thinking about the whole ordeal. It had started with a simple refusal to let an HOA push me around, and ended with a criminal conviction and a complete vindication of my property rights. The bridge I'd built to replace the one I'd torn down was different but still solid. It represented the same values my great-grandfather had built into the original: independence, self-reliance, and the fundamental right to be left alone on your own land. I thought about Patricia in prison, probably still convinced she'd been right and I'd been the villain. Some people never learn that other people's rights matter just as much as their own desires. The Pine Ridge development continued, but humbled. Property values eventually stabilized, though they never reached the heights Patricia had promised. The elaborate dock sat mostly unused. There was no resort, no beach club, no exclusive amenities. Just 30 expensive houses and a bunch of residents who'd learned an expensive lesson about the dangers of HOA overreach. As winter settled in and the lake froze solid, I felt genuinely at peace for the first time in months. My property was secure, my rights were protected, and the people who tried to take advantage of me were facing consequences. I rebuilt the bridge because I wanted to, not because anyone forced me. And that made all the difference. The legal system had worked the way it was supposed to. Patricia's crimes had been exposed and punished. The HOA's frivolous lawsuit had been dismissed, and they'd paid for their harassment. Justice, real justice, had been served. I spent that winter maintaining my property, working on the cabin, and enjoying the solitude I'd fought so hard to preserve. Spring came early in 2026, and with it, a new beginning. The Pine Ridge HOA kept their word and left me alone. I kept my word and maintained my bridge privately, for my use only. The eastern shore of my property remained pristine and untouched, exactly as it had been when my great-grandfather first built his cabin there 100 years ago. Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk out onto my bridge and look across at the development. Lights in the windows, people living their lives, completely unaware that their former HOA president had tried to steal my land to make them happy. It was a reminder that even in modern America, property rights still meant something. That individuals could still stand up to organizations with money and power. That saying no to bullies, even when it cost you time and money and stress, was worth it in the end. The bridge my great-grandfather built had lasted a century before I took it down. The bridge I built to replace it would last another century, standing as a testament to the principle that a man's land is his own, and no HOA, no matter how powerful or entitled, could take that away. I never regretted tearing down the original bridge. It had been a strategic move that ended the harassment and exposed Patricia's true intentions. And in rebuilding it on my own terms, I'd proven the point that mattered most. This was my property, my bridge, my decision. The story spread through Brainerd and the surrounding communities. When people asked me about it at the hardware store or the diner, I kept it simple. HOA wanted control of my bridge, so I took it away. When I rebuilt it, I did it for me, not them. Most people understood. In rural Minnesota, property rights are sacred. The idea of an HOA trying to force someone to upgrade their bridge so HOA residents could use it struck people as fundamentally wrong. I became something of a local legend, the guy who'd stood up to the HOA and won. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it gets. I worked my land, fished my lake, and enjoyed the peace that came from knowing my property was truly mine. The harassment was over, the lawsuits were done, and Patricia was behind bars where she belonged. Years from now, maybe my own grandkids would walk across this bridge and I'd tell them the story. How their great-great-great-grandfather built the first bridge by hand. How I tore it down to protect our land from people who wanted to take it. How I rebuilt it stronger than before, incorporating the old timbers with new materials, honoring the past while securing the future. That bridge wasn't just wood and nails. It was a symbol of resistance against overreach, of individual rights against collective demands, of family heritage against corporate greed. And every time I crossed it, I remembered what I'd learned. Sometimes, the best way to win a fight is to take away what the other side wants most. Patricia wanted my bridge for her resort plans, so I removed it. When she couldn't adapt, when she broke the law trying to get what she wanted anyway, she destroyed herself. I'd simply defended what was mine. Nothing more, nothing less. The snow fell heavier now, blanketing the property in white. The lake was frozen solid, the development lights twinkling in the distance. My cabin was warm, my bridge was strong, and my land was secure. I raised my beer toward the Pine Ridge development in a silent toast. Thanks for the lesson, Patricia. Turns out you can't always get what you want, especially when it belongs to someone else. The wind carried my words away across the frozen lake, and I headed back inside, content in the knowledge that I'd fought for my rights and won. The bridge, my bridge, would stand for another 100 years. And this time, nobody would ever threaten to take it away. Justice had been served, property rights had been defended, and a would-be thief had learned that some things can't be bullied or bought or stolen. Some things, like family land and personal freedom, are worth fighting for no matter the cost. I'd paid that cost and emerged victorious. The bridge was mine, the land was mine, and the future was mine to decide. That was worth everything I'd been through.